Hey folks, welcome back to the farm. We're getting some of our first tomatoes of the season and we're really enjoying that. But not all the news is good news. We're going to have to take some pretty drastic measures this year. So stick around. We'll go through all that with you. These are some of our first tomatoes coming off the vine. These are our first little tiny slicer tomatoes that were ripe. Pretty motley looking bunch of tomatoes. But we've got our sweet 100s came in. So we've got some cherry tomatoes too. So before we get outside and show you what we're dealing with, we're going to have a nice little salad for lunch. We've got our favorite blue cheese dressing, and I don't know if you've ever had, if you enjoy blue cheese dressing, try it with raisins in your salad. That is a match made in heaven. But let's have lunch and then we'll show you what else we're doing. So here's our root cellar. We've been doing pretty good restocking this year because pickings were getting slim. You remember we did a bunch of the dry beans. We did our corn here the other day. But herein lies the problem. We had 40 quarts of tomatoes down here, and now we're down to 2. And if you've been following along, you know we've been having issues here on the homestead with tomatoes this year, and we didn't get any last year. So there's going to be an issue if we don't do something. It'll be 3 weeks ago tomorrow that we had a crazy hailstorm out here on the homestead. Not many areas around us got hit with it. We were just in line with it. And it wiped out most of our garden and did a lot of damage out there. So I've done an update since, but let's show you what we're dealing with just with the tomatoes. So we had lots of tomatoes like these that were damaged by the hailstorm. It hurt the skins, knocked a lot of leaves off, and then they got sunburnt and started to rot. So let's go out in the garden. We'll show you the plants. So these are our paste or Roma tomatoes right here in this part of the row. They got really battered. And the problem with the Roma tomatoes is they're a determinate variety. So they kind of do one push, ripen up all their tomatoes, and then they're done for the year. So because they're determinate, the bushes really aren't going to continue producing, and because they were so damaged, we're not going to get a lot of our Roma tomatoes. This is probably the best vine right here that we have. You can see there's a few on there. Some of them are a little deformed. But that's what we have to deal with. Unlike our other tomatoes down the row there that are indeterminate, you can see that they just bounce back and they continue to grow all season. And we have a lot of nice green tomatoes forming on these. These are our slicer varieties here. You can see that we're going to have some fairly good tomatoes. And then these are all our sweet 100s down here. They're bouncing back. You can see we're starting to get some new fruit to develop on here after the storm. So these are going to actually produce, and they'll come in clusters like sweet 100s do. Here's one back here. Going to eat that one. So those are the issues we're dealing with. Our root cellar's empty, and we don't really have the canning tomato supply that we need to put those tomatoes back on the shelf. So what are our options? I could find other local farmers around me that have excess tomatoes that I could buy tomatoes from, or they'll just give me. But we've had just a terrible year for tomatoes yet again, because it's been really cool and moist, and the tomatoes just not have been thriving all over our area. So everybody's kind of short on tomatoes around here. So the next option, go to the store and buy tomatoes out of your produce aisle. Problem I have with that is those tomatoes were picked usually very almost green and were allowed to ripen in transit, so they would make the trip, so they don't get that really vine ripened flavor. Now the other option after that is to just buy tomatoes in the store until we can get a good tomato crop. The canned tomatoes from the store, you can get good quality canned tomatoes, because we moved from Central California, where most of these big companies that supply all these other brands, they can them under many different labels. Those tomatoes go from the field, are put in a truck, they're already vine ripened, and they get taken to the processing plant, and they're put in the can within 24 hours, usually less. So those are actually vine ripened tomatoes. Most of those you buy in the can in the store. There's several main brands that do a lot of the off brands. So problem with that is you're going to pay a little over $2 a can in most places, unless they're on sale for good quality tomatoes, ones that don't come from China or Mexico or somewhere else other than the United States. So the other option is to buy in bulk in can. So if you go to a store that's got the big, like number 10 cans, the big cans that look like gallon size almost, you can buy in bulk a lot cheaper for like $1 a pound, which is fairly cheap for tomatoes. You're saving yourself a lot of money. And what you do is you break down those cans. And we're going to show you how to do that. You're basically taking those tomatoes out of the big can, you're processing them into smaller containers that you can use up in a timely fashion at your home, instead of having this gigantic can of tomatoes where some of them is going to go to waste. So we're going to show you how to do that. So there's a big advantage to that, and many advantages actually. One, they've taken all the work out of it. They've cored them, they've peeled them, they've done everything they need to do. They cooked them down, and they've added the salt, they've added the citric acid, they've done all the work. So basically all you have to do is warm them up, put them in your jar, and reseal them. Super simple. There's our big number 10 cans of tomatoes. We had 4 cans. We put them in our roaster here. We've got this roaster last part of last year. I've been borrowing my cousin's, but now we got our own for doing tomatoes and canning. So we're going to warm this up. I got it set on about 300. We're going to bring this to a simmer is all we need to do. And we got the big canner out. And you're probably wondering why I don't use our newfangled digital canners. That's because I'm going to put these tomatoes in quart jars. And I cannot water bath quart jars in our new canners because you can't get the water deep enough to do quart jars. However, you can water bath pint jars. So we're going to go down and get the jars. Now each of these cans were about 6.5 pounds. So going with the old rule that a pint is a pound, that would be about 3 quarts per can. So 3, 6, 9, 12. This will probably do 10 to 12 quarts. So we're just going to go down and get a dozen quart jars and get ready. We'll get them sanitized up and prepare for the process. We've got our jars. I only got 10 because I have 2 more that just came out of the dishwasher upstairs that we just emptied. I've got our wide mouth rings, and then I'm going to need a box of 12 wide mouth lids. So we'll get that stuff upstairs. All right, got our big water bath canner filled with our jars. These jars have been out of the dishwasher. So we're just going to put water in here, and we'll heat this water up, and that'll re-sanitize these jars. Now our new stove has this big burner in the middle, like if you want to use a griddle or something, and that is perfect for these big canners like this. Now there's nothing saying you can't pressure can tomatoes, and actually you can do that in like under 15 minutes after, you know, the whole process and everything. There's a process to pressure canning. But we're going to water bath just because we can do more at one time. And I've already got my canners put away in the garage. This one's super easy to get out. But a water bath, when we pack the jars hot like we're going to, those need to sit in a boiling water bath for 45 minutes. and then they're done. You can pull them out, let them cool. That's it. Now while we're waiting for our tomatoes in the roaster to warm up enough to can, I'm going to take these Roma tomatoes from the garden, and we're going to do what's called core and score them. So we'll cut the top core out of it, and then the bottom part of the tomato we'll cut an X in it, and then we're going to put it in a freezer bag, and then we're going to put these tomatoes in the freezer, and then as the other ones ripen in the garden, we'll pull those in and do the same thing. And then once all of those Roma tomatoes are off the vine and we pull the plants up and they're done, we'll pull all of our frozen tomatoes out of the freezer, and when they thaw, the skins will slip right off of these tomatoes. You won't have to blanch them to get the skins off. They'll peel right off. And then all we got to do is throw them in our cooker and cook them down and can those as well. All right, off to the freezer these go. We'll just add to this bag. Usually I use the 2-gallon bag, but I'm out of those. I need to pick another box up at the store. But we can add to this bag those 2 little tiny slicer tomatoes. I'm just going to hold on to those in case I want a sandwich tomorrow or something. So let's get these down the freezer. Give your tomatoes a stir every now and then, because these cookers, they heat more from the side than they do from the bottom. Kind of an indirect heat. So you don't have to stir them as often because they won't scorch on the bottom. But you do need to stir them to get a nice even heat all the way through until they come up to temperature. Tomatoes look pretty good, don't they? They smell good. Good quality tomatoes. Those are beautiful. You can tell because how nice, beautiful red they are. They were most likely ripened on the vine. Our tomatoes have been simmering. They're plenty hot to put in the jar, so we are ready to go. So what I've done, we've loaded the jars in the pot, and we filled the jars and the pot and everything up to the level that we need when we can. And then once this is almost to a boil, we'll pull these jars out of the water. We'll dump the jar out in the sink because the jar will be full when it goes back in. We do it this way so we know we have the right water level in there, because if we're ready to can and we got to add water to get to the correct level, it's going to keep it that much longer from boiling. So this works really well. We're going to throw the lid on and speed up the process. Our water's just about to boil, so we can start filling jars. So we've got our setup over here. We're going to fill this jar till it comes up to the very bottom of the funnel down here. And then we'll put a lid on it and a ring and throw it back in the pot. All right, we got our jars full. We ended up with 12, so we have 2 extra that won't fit in the canner. We're just going to let these cool off, and then we'll put them in the fridge, and we'll use them within the next week or so fairly easily. But we've got 10 in here in the canner. We're going to put the lid on here so it'll come back to a boil, and then we'll let them boil for 45 minutes. So that's good info to have on hand. 4 number 10 cans will give you 12 quarts of whatever product that you're canning. You don't have to do this type of tomatoes. You could do stewed tomatoes. You could do virtually any tomato product that comes in a number 10 can. You can break it down and recan it. Our jars are done, so we can get them pulled out. All right, we got them all out. We're going to let those cool. We'll see you in the morning. All right, folks, it's the next morning. We got our rings off and we got our jars all cleaned up. Just got to label them and put them down in the root cellar. We'll be happy to have these on the shelf. So if you were unaware that you could do this, I hope that helped you out a little bit. If you get in the pinch in your garden like we did, you can still get some decent cheap tomatoes on the shelf without costing you a lot of money. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us on Mark Kelly Farm.